Did you know that more than 10% of the adult population in the U.S. experiences panic attacks? And yet many people don't even know what panic attacks are, or they use the word to just refer to feeling afraid or the emotion of fear, or being scared of something. In today's episode, we're going to look at what is a panic attack. There actually is a clinical definition, but we're going to go beyond that to help you understand what a panic attack feels like. And if you've experienced them, this will help you explain it to people who haven't experienced it themselves. And if you've never experienced a panic attack, this may give you some compassion for those who have, and may help you recognize some things about your own anxiety when you experience it. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Hamlin. Welcome to the Steps and Tools podcast for emotional intelligence. In today's episode, we're going to look at how to understand panic attacks and make sense of them. Did you know that there's actually over 30,000 types of panic attacks? It comes from just doing the math of combinations. There are 13 symptoms of a panic attack. Number 1, palpitations, pounding heart, or accelerated heart rate. Number 2, sweating. Number 3, trembling or shaking. Number 4, sensations of shortness of breath or that feeling of being smothered. 5, feelings of choking, feeling like you're choking, your throat is constricting and you're afraid that you might choke. 6, chest pain or discomfort. 7, nausea or abdominal distress. This is very common. 8, feeling dizzy, unsteady, lightheaded. Number 9, chills or heat sensations. It's hot flashes, hot and cold sensations. Number 10, a numbness or tingling sensation. And number 11 requires a little explanation, derealization or depersonalization. Derealization is this sense that you're in a movie, you're feeling very unreal, and it's like you're watching a movie from a park bench and you're not in the movie, you're just watching it, and that life is just going on detached from you, around you. Depersonalization is when you have this sense of when you're out of your body, and a lot of people who have extreme anxiety report that sort of sensation. Number 12 is the fear of losing control or going crazy. It's a horrible feeling, but the feeling of like I'm just going to lose it, I'm going to do something that's going to make me embarrassed, or I'm just going to go crazy, I'm going to lose my mind. And then 13 is fear of dying. So a lot of times when people have a panic attack and they don't know what they're experiencing, they don't know what it is, they can go to the worst case scenario and they assume that they might be dying. So these are pretty difficult symptoms. Some of them are more scary than others, but the definition of a panic attack is a sudden, abrupt onset of fear that comes to a peak within a few minutes and then tapers off. And that sudden upsurge of fear is a combination of 4 or more of these symptoms that we just went over. So if you do the math, how many combinations of 4 or how many combinations of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 can you get from 13 symptoms? And if you add in the fact that panic attacks can be mild, medium, or severe, you come out with a number that's right around 32,000. So how in the world can you recognize a panic attack if there are that many different combinations? Well, the simplest way is to think of it like this. Imagine that you went out to buy something late at night. The stores are closed, you go to a convenience store, you walk in and do your business, buy something, you come out, and as you're going to your car, you feel the barrel of a gun on your neck, and you're terrified. Your heart, you have an immediate adrenaline rush. Your heart is pounding. your breathing changes, you're sweating, you're feeling all sorts of things in your body that you don't normally feel, even when you're worked up. And you may be even fearing you're going to die, or you're afraid that you're going to do something that will get you killed. Now, that is very similar to the sensation of a panic attack, but it's not quite like a panic attack because there's one feature missing. You have to take the same scenario, the same story. You're walking out of the convenience store late at night, and you start to have all of those feelings, all of those sensations, but there's nobody else there. You're all alone. You look around, there's nobody pointing a gun at you. There's nothing that anyone could see that would be scary. So, yes, it's probably scarier to have a gun at the back of your head, but on the other hand, it is terribly frightening to have that same reaction and not be able to see a cause. So this is where it often makes people feel like they might be going crazy. Like, what is going on? There's nothing to be afraid of. Why would I just suddenly be overcome with fear? So I find that's the best way to explain a panic attack to somebody who's never had it. I find that's the best way to explain what a panic attack feels like to someone who is having trouble getting their mind around it. What often happens then is that when people have a panic attack in a public area, they associate their surroundings with that experience. So if they go to a restaurant, a large restaurant, and they have a panic attack, now they feel like they can never go to that restaurant again. It's not a rational thought because the panic attack could have been triggered by something that somebody said in the restaurant, and they didn't know it, but they associate it with the building itself, and so they stop going to that restaurant. And then as they avoid that restaurant, they find that they want to play it safe and avoid all restaurants. So then now they never go to a restaurant. And then it can further generalize to all buildings in public places. Now they never go to a shopping mall or never go to a big box store because it's too similar to that place that they had that original panic attack. And this is where panic attacks, when they get going and they happen frequently, can often make a person's life become very, very small. So they one by one, they started avoiding things that they used to do until the circle of their life and the sphere of their life just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until pretty soon they're homebound and they can't leave their house without somebody else with them or with a lot of incentive or encouragement. And when it gets to be at that stage, we call it agoraphobia. Another important concept for understanding panic attacks and making sense of them is what I call the panic spiral. And if you picture a spiral starting at the bottom and then circulating around and around, going higher and higher, this is roughly a picture of what's happening in your sensation of anxiety during a panic attack. It usually starts with a kind of sensation in your body or a very vague thought that you're half aware of or maybe not even aware of. And that sensation or that thought leads to a reaction in you where you have this sensation of unease, or you have your mood shifts a little bit, or you have this thought of, I wonder if I'm having a panic attack. I wonder if I'm gonna lose it here. And it could be a fleeting thought that you're almost not aware of at all, but it's just enough to get your brain to send signals to your internal organs to release stress hormones into your body. They go into your bloodstream, your blood carries them everywhere, your entire body is activated, even just a little bit for stress. Once that happens, it's easier to have another anxious thought, and there the spiral starts to go up. And then your body reacts to that anxious thought, and you have more sensations in your body, some of these symptoms that we talked about earlier of panic. And then you have more anxious thoughts because your body is more revved up. Your brain is soaked in adrenaline, if you want to think of it that way. And the spiral continues until you're very aware that you're overwhelmed with fear and you can hardly think about anything else, and you feel like you can't hardly move or give your attention to anything but just how anxious you feel. So the panic spiral is a very real thing, and it helps us understand two of the most common causes of panic attacks. In my experience with people, and actually in my own life, I had panic attacks many years ago. I had no idea what they were. This was before I had studied any psychology, and it was very, very frightening. Had no idea what was going on. Looking back, I can see very clearly. And so there's a sense of control that you have just from knowing what a panic attack is and knowing that it won't hurt you, that you can just ride it out. But it also helps to understand the causes. So one of the common causes is that you tend to stuff emotions down, and you have something that's really weighing on you, something that you're worried about. It could be work, it could be a relationship, it could be your child, a parent. It could be anything that you're just really worried about, but for whatever reason, your style of dealing with those emotions is to stuff that down. Or maybe you're just in a highly stressful situation and you have to stuff it down because you've got other things you've got to give your attention to. There could be all sorts of reasons why you stuff it down, but it's as if your emotional mechanism of worry inside you is getting spring-loaded for something. And once that happens, then it can be a very minor thing that causes you to have a sensation in your body. It could be that you're just daydreaming about something while you're driving, and so you notice that your hand is shaking, or you notice that you have a little bit of nausea, and if you interpret that as the beginnings of a panic attack, you're going to tend to be more anxious. Your brain is going to send signals to your internal organs to release more stress hormones into your bloodstream, and you are going to have more of these panic symptoms starting up. And then each time you are aware of another symptom, you react to that with another catastrophic thought, and this just keeps the spiral going upward. Now, one way to look at that is just to say that you're panicking because you're panicking. So panic feeds panic. And one of the first things that I do with clients when I'm working with them to overcome panic attacks is just to educate them, help them understand what's going on, and show them some ways to not be afraid of actually having a panic attack. It's a dreadful experience, so it's nothing that you would want to look for or seek. But when you try to resist it and you try to stop it, it just becomes more messy and you end up becoming more anxious and the panic attack gets stronger. You know, I live in Southern California, about an hour's drive from the ocean. And here in Southern California, we never talk about distance in terms of miles or kilometers. It's always in terms of the time it takes you to get somewhere, because someplace could be 20 miles, but it could take you an hour and a half to get there because of traffic. So I live about an hour from the Pacific Ocean, and I've spent a fair number of times at the beach, and I enjoy the waves. But sometimes the waves are enormous, and if you try to stand on the sand in the water and try to stop the wave or resist it, it's likely that if it's a big enough wave, it will throw you down and throw your head almost down to the sand, and you come up with a lot of salt water in your lungs and you're coughing and sputtering. But if you actually just sort of work with the wave and you either let it carry you up and you just kind of glide over it, or if you dive underneath it, it just goes right over you and you just come up without having been disturbed very much at all. And this is a metaphor that I often use with clients because it helps us conceptualize that the panic attack is like that wave of anxiety. And if you try to resist it and you try to say, "Oh no, I can't do this. Oh no, here it comes again. I can't bear this. I don't want this to happen." You end up just to mix a metaphor, adding kerosene to the fire, and you make the wave ends up forcing you to do somersaults in all sorts of awkward positions. And the panic attack gets worse. But if you work with the wave and you say to yourself, I may be having a panic attack. I'm not sure. It feels like the beginning of one, but I'm going to just let it wash over me. And I'm going to remind myself all the way through it that even though I've had them before, they've never killed me. They've never hurt me. It's just a very, very unpleasant experience. So that way, when you begin to talk to yourself that way, you begin to stop the upward momentum of the panic spiral. And you may still have a panic attack, but you begin to have less severe panic attacks, and that's usually the first step for wiping them out entirely. Another common cause of panic attacks has to do with triggers related to trauma. So if you've had an experience in the past that was just overwhelming, either a natural disaster or someone assaulted you, and you've never really processed that verbally and sorted through the emotions the way you would sort through a closet that was stuffed full of just all sorts of things, then these pockets of emotion, if you can think of them that way, they seem to build up. And sometimes there's a trigger in your present environment that just seems to poke that pocket and open it up, and all that emotion starts coming out. So the panic attack then becomes something an emotion that really does fit with the situation that you originally were in, that you're trying to forget, but it doesn't fit with the situation that you're in now. So let's go back to our original example of the man walking out of the convenience store, and there's nobody holding a gun to his head, but he has this reaction as if somebody was doing that. Perhaps he heard an emergency vehicle in the distance, and perhaps he has a relative that was in a terrible auto accident. He's never really processed that emotion, but it really spooked him at a deeper level, and he's never really kind of faced up to that. And maybe that just hearing that siren, for whatever reason, maybe he was, low on sleep, a little bit more vulnerable, and that stimulus triggered the beginnings of a panic attack. Now, he may not know that. He may not know what triggered him. He just knows he's having the panic attack. But part of what therapy does is it helps you become more self-aware, more emotionally intelligent about the things that get into your head and make you anxious. And there's a great deal of empowerment with just understanding what kinds of things spook you and how to not avoid good things, even though you might be spooked by some aspects of your environment. So I hope this helps you to understand panic attacks. I'm Dr. Greg Hamlin. Thanks for listening.